Blog Talk Radio.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico. This week on Golf Talk Live, I'm joined by John O'Hearn, author who wrote an incredibly funny and just a great book called Sweet Spot, Confessions of a Golfaholic. I'm going to bring John out here in just a moment or two, but before I do, I just want to remind everybody that tonight's broadcast is live here on blogtalkradio.com, and we'll go from 6 p.m. Central Standard Time right through till 8 p.m. This evening on Central Standard Time. I just remind everybody that during the live broadcast, if you want to call into the program and say hello, you're welcome to do so at any time. You can reach us here at area code 646-716-4667. You can also email me during the show if you want, if you have any questions or comments, at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. And, of course, for those of you surfing around on Facebook, be sure to visit our Facebook page, Golf Talk Live blog, and throw a few likes our way. Certainly appreciate it. Also, for those of you that want to follow me on Twitter, I appreciate all of you in the last couple of months that have been adding to my Twitter followers. The Twitter handle is Ted and Buck CEO, and that's capital CEO. And, of course, make sure you visit the website at golftalkliveblog.com and check out some of the great books and products. And tonight's guest, we're going to put his book up there in the next few days so that you can get a chance to make sure that you purchase it. It's a fantastic book. I enjoyed reading it. And before I go any further, let me just read you a little excerpt, if you will, just to give you an idea of what the book is about. The book is basically Breaking Bad meets Caddyshack, as John has indicated. The main characters are Tom and Carol, have the perfect life, a good job, good home, two wonderful kids. Well, Carol yearns for Tom to join in her search for new age spiritual bliss. Tom's boss insists he take up golf as a business networking tool. In a classic cautionary tale of a happy marriage gone adrift, following our hero Tom as his obsession takes hold and steers him down a dark, twisted road of substance abuse. In this case, the substance abuse is golf. Without further hesitation, let me bring up my guest this evening. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ted, thanks for having me. I appreciate it very much. Nice reading. I like that.
Well, I just wanted to give the listeners just a little bit of a sense of what the book is really about. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, John, is, obviously in the golf business, there's a lot of great books written, mainly about how to play golf and how to improve your game. But every once in a while, I like to bring something on here that's a little bit different. And this is really not about how to improve your game or anything like that. It's really a story that you've put together, and it's just an incredible read. And I can't emphasize it enough. And we're going to get right into it. So first thing, and we talked a little bit off air, of course. And we're going to let everybody know where they can get a copy of the book. If you want to get a copy of the book that John has put together, you can get it available at Amazon.com. And if you want more information on the book, you can visit his website at www.sweetspotthebook.com. John, let's talk a little bit about Sweet Spot. It was obviously originally derived from a stage play. Is that correct?
That's correct. I had done a one-man show in New York. 1995, something like that, and I'd written it, and we produced it and did it in New York, and then toured it around a little bit in New England, and had a lot of fun with it. And it was about my wife's first pregnancy from a man's point of view, so there was a lot of tongue-in-cheek humor in it. And when I got done with that project, people started coming up to me and saying, "What are you going to write next?" Now, up to that point, I really did not see myself as a writer, but so I did stick with it, though, and I did decide that my next project would be a golf topic, because I had gotten into golf rather seriously at that time. And what struck me in my writing, and I was writing little scenes about golf, and what finally struck me as being really the funniest aspect of golf is the addictive nature of the game, of actually swinging a golf club and hitting a golf ball flush is such a delicious feeling. And I personally became thoroughly addicted to doing it. And if I didn't get out and hit my bucket of balls during the day, I was a little testy. I was a little jumpy, as if I hadn't gotten my fix for the day. And I started writing scenes like that. And suddenly I got this idea of doing a show about a fellow who becomes totally addicted to golf. And it became more than just a show about the addiction, but also about the marital relationship. and what happens
right.
over time in a relationship, particularly if one person grows one way and one person grows the other. And yet they still love each other, but there's a distance that has come between them. And I thought it would be very funny because there is a lot of talk about golf widows and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
If I could put together a show with that kind of a theme, and it's almost a double theme. It's almost a theme about addiction and substance abuse. In this case, the substance is golf, and also marriage,
right.
and how marriage is marriage has to undergo a lot of stresses. And it takes a lot of work to make a marriage survive. And yet there's a lot of humor in there that we, people who have been married for any length of time, understand. And if I could join those two stories together, that would be great. And that's what I did. What I found... Go ahead.
No, go ahead, sorry. No, go ahead.
Well, when I performed the play, audiences loved it. And then I got done with that whole production, and I felt as if there was so much more room to grow with the characters that I had sketched out in this little hour-and-a-half play. And that's what drove me to sit down, and I just started fooling around with the notion of taking the character of Tom or taking the character of Tank or Connie, his wife, who I loved writing that character. I just loved writing that character.
Yeah.
And just filling it out and filling in all the blanks. And what would happen what did she really look like? And what did Connie, what was her behavior? And did she smoke or did she drink? And did she play golf? Or, answer all of those questions and begin to write. And that's how it came to be. That's in a nutshell.
Yeah, and as we were just talking a minute ago before we went live, normally from my experience, quite often you'll see it sort of done the other way around, where the book will be written first, and then quite often the play will sort of materialize out of it. And I have to give you a lot of credit. It's not easy to sort of take the play first and then go the other route. Obviously, you had to, as you said, expand the characters a little bit from an hour and a half play. And as I said earlier, I can't emphasize enough, it's extremely well written and very funny and very true to point. I mean, there's a lot of things, and obviously we're not going to give out too much detail here because we want people to pick up a copy of the book. But what I found most interesting too, and this is one of the things I wanted to ask you, obviously, who were the characters sort of based on? Was there a certain amount of it sort of obviously out of your own experiences, but were there some sort of real-life situations where you based some of these characters from?
Yeah, there were. It turns out, that I got a job working in the local golf course, and I've been working there for about 8 years. And when I first started to work there, by then I was fully involved in my own addiction as a golfer. I think they actually hired me because I was hanging around so much they just decided to put me to work. And the first thing I noticed was that there were so many other people like me who had gone golf nuts. I mean, they were insane. And I thought, wow, that guy reminds me of me. And I began to take notes, believe it or not. I started to take little notes about little things that would happen. One of my favorite stories was a guy, I was in the shop. I think I'd been working there for about 2 weeks, and it was a September day. It had been raining for 3 or 4 days straight, and the first fairway was completely underwater. And this guy comes into the shop, gets soaked just going from his car to come into the shop, and he looks at me by myself. I'm behind the counter, really green behind the ears, and then he looks out at the first fairway, and then back at me, and then back at the first fairway, and then back at me, and then he says, "So what do you think?" And I didn't know what to say. I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" I couldn't comprehend that he actually wanted to go out, but he did. And I was absolutely flabbergasted. And that was the first notion I had, the first inkling. I went, boy, these people are really bonkers. And yet I knew, given my druthers, I probably would have done the same damn thing. And so I started to sort of pay attention a little bit and watch. And I told my boss about it. I said, these people are coming to the window like junkies who need a fix. And their voices get all kind of breathy, and they do things like if the course is crowded, they'll say things like, "Well, can you get me out? Oh, well, how about the back nine? Can you get me on the back nine?" And I'm like, "Whoa, cowboy!" It was like, settle down. But it really struck me as really funny, and I started to, I go, "Wow, these people are nuts." And but I loved it, and it was just from there it was very easy.
Yeah, and you know what's so true, and I'm sort of drawing from my own experiences. Obviously, I teach golf now and that, but when I was younger and really learning the game and started to play with a lot of my friends, I can remember, doing some crazy things myself, and I can remember quite often when I was probably in about my mid to late 20s, I was playing with a particular group, and when I first started playing with them, much like how it happened with the character in your book. They had invited me to sort of join with their group. One of the regular people had I won't get into specifics because I don't want to give away anything, secrets of your book, but something had happened with one of the players, and he was no longer going to be part of their foursome. So, of course, I knew one of the gentlemen. He made me part of it. And what was kind of interesting was they would make tea times at the most ungodly hour you could imagine. I mean, I like to get up early, and I'm a morning person. But they would literally get out on the golf course before the sun would even rise. And what was more surprising, and that was just because a lot of times you couldn't always book too early. So you had to, it was sort of a first come, first serve because it was that particular course was a public course they were playing. But what was really uniquely interesting is the pro would put people out. And I mean, there was not a stitch of sunlight anywhere. It was completely pitch dark. And a lot of the guys were teeing off with colored golf balls just to be able to, because the white balls you couldn't see, so they were hoping that maybe they would see it. And I would think to myself, you got to be kidding me. And there'd be like 5 or 6 groups off, and the sun still hadn't peaked over the crest. So, it sort of fed into that addiction, as you said. Like that's how. And I'm thinking to myself, I got to be crazy to be out here at 5 o'clock or 4:30 in the morning hitting a golf ball, and I don't even know where it's going.
No, I can. I've had the same experience because I work at the golf shop, and I'm there first thing in the morning, and the same group comes up to the window. There's a frost delay. They got their mittens on, and for them, it's almost like a job. Like I'm coming to work today, and I made it to work today. I punched in, and by God, I'm gonna get my 18, and it's really it's astonishing. It's astonishing. But the other theme of the book, the thing that also I tried to put in, and we were talking about this earlier, was the husband and wife relationship. And I felt, to me, that was, it was something that I had a lot of experience in. I've been married for 27 years, and marriages have a lot of ups and downs. And I'll tell you a story. I belonged to a theater group. I'm an actor, and I was writing these little golf scenes. When I was first writing the play, this is like when I first had the idea of the whole thing, and I thought that the husband and wife relationship, that dynamic was really interesting and fun to kind of explore. And so one day I was at the typewriter and I was banging away, and I came up with a line that the wife is arguing with the husband because he has brought all of his golf paraphernalia into the bedroom, and she actually catches him in bed waxing his club heads. And so she has a fit, and she says, "You have to get this stuff out of here. There's not room for the 3 of us." And he says, "Well, you're talking like I'm having an affair." And she says, "You are having an affair. It's with golf. Golf is your mistress."
Yeah.
And he says, "Oh, don't be ridiculous." And as I sat there typing, and I typed out the sentence where the wife cries out, "You wouldn't have sex with me now if I painted myself green and planted a flag on my chest."
Yeah.
And as I wrote it, I went, "Oh, there it is." And so,
there's some.
One of the little themes was that golf is kind of a sexual replacement for guys in middle age. Now, is it true? Yeah. I don't know, but it was fun to explore.
Yeah, no, it is. It is so often true, and it's amazing. What I found really interesting, and as I said, we don't want to give too much away of the book, but what I found interesting is some of the, obviously the main character is Tom and his wife Carol. And what I found really interesting is some of the excuses and responses that he would give when his wife would question him. And, when I think about people I've known over the years, as I was saying earlier, married couples in that particular that I've known over the years, it was amazing some of the stories that would come up. Now, obviously, they didn't go quite to the same extent as what your characters here in the book went, but there was an awful lot of some of the same shenanigans that would be going on. And I'm sitting there thinking, I don't know how you guys have made it this far, because it's true. It is it's unlike any other sport. I think. I mean, I've played since I was 7 years old, And as I said, I teach now and have for a number of years. But I thoroughly enjoy the game, and I wouldn't say I would be your classic, or certainly not to the extent that you have in the book here. Would I consider myself a golfaholic? Excuse me. But there was a time in my life where I would eat, sleep, and breathe golf.
Right.
And then I sort of took stock in myself, and I thought, I love the game, and it's great, and I enjoy it. But there's really no other game that I know of that consumes you the same way as golf. I mean, lots of people watch football, lots of people will watch baseball, but they're not, getting to the point where they're sneaking out of the house and coming home late because they've been on the driving range for the last 4 or 5 hours.
Well, I love that whole notion that you get in the back of your mind that I know I can do this. If I just keep at it, I know I can do it. And so that's what happens. You just get that little bug in your head. And every now and again. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, what I found interesting, too, was, and this was sort of leading into my next question about some of the characters. Now, you threw in a spiritual aspect in there with Tom's wife, Carol. Why did you feel that necessary to bring that into the fold?
It kind of happened. I'll tell you two things. First of all, my wife is very much like Carol in that regard.
Right.
She's been on this long spiritual journey almost ever since I knew her. And what I felt, and so that I had that in the back of my head, and then I felt that Tom, because he becomes so enamored with the game of golf that it goes on a spiritual level for him.
Yeah.
Now, it's a kind of a strange spiritual level, and, we bring Ben Hogan's ghost into it a little bit. But he goes on this spiritual journey. And what I felt was required story-wise as a writer, what I thought was required was that the wife also has to be on some kind of spiritual journey. So they're both on spiritual journeys. They're just going in different directions.
Yeah, and it's interesting because she tries to move him into that to her direction, and of course he sort of rebuffs, which I found very interesting because he really didn't seem all that. In fact, he quite often early in the book mocks her journey and but yet goes on his own as well.
Right.
And it was very, very interesting.
Well, then what I thought was kind of fun was that he sort of then accepts the concept of a spiritual journey, but he sort of bastardizes it into his own perverted kind of way. And so I thought that was funny too. It's just it's a funny book. It was meant to be funny and not too serious, but it's based on, I think, a certain level of truth, so that as we read it, we go, oh, right, yeah, that could happen. And that was it.
Yeah. Well, what do you think was your primary goal, really, to bring this story to life? Why did you feel? Like I said, as I said at the very beginning, there's a lot of different golf books written out there. Obviously, many of them are instructional. A lot of different golf stories. But what particularly really attracted you to this kind of story? What was sort of in your mind at the time when you decided to put this together?
Well, Ted, I've always been a funny guy. I'm not so sure that I have stand-up comedian skills, but I wish I did. Mm-hmm. And I've always sort of enjoyed being funny. All of the acting I've ever done has always been character roles. I'm one of those guys who, more often than that, will say what most people are thinking. And sometimes it gets me into trouble, sometimes it doesn't. But that's the way my brain works. And so I thought about it. I bet there was a 5-year lapse between when I did my first play in New York that I wrote and when I started working on my golf show. So I thought about it. I sat on it and let it percolate for 5 years in my head. And what I came up with was that the concept of addiction in golf is talked about a little.
Right.
But it's not no one. And I did a little research. I went around and looked at all the golf books that were out there. Nobody really talks about the addiction of it.
Yeah.
And yet, you occasionally you'll see somebody. You'll hear one of the announcers on television say, "Oh, he's a real addict."
Yeah.
And I remember watching the Pebble Beach Pro-Am a couple of years ago, and there was a musician on. I forget who it was, Southern fella, and they said, "We understand." Wow. Somebody was interviewing him, and they said, "We understand you're a real golf has really consumed you. And he went, oh, well, all of my friends will tell you that golf is a heroine of sport. And I remember hearing that going, he's exactly right. I had a line in the play where the wife complains and says, the golf shop is a crack house. And I went, there it is. It's like there's this terrible addictive quality about the game. And I just think it's funny because it takes normal people and makes them, if you take somebody who's a normal person and you give them an addiction, whether it's in a movie or a play or in real life, they don't act like normal people. They act with an undercurrent of desire that alters everything they say and do. And to me, it's tragic in real life because they end up, destroying themselves. But if you put golf as the addictive substance, it's actually kind of funny. And that's where I went with it.
Yeah, and it is so true. There is so many parallels, and a lot of people, as you indicated, will sort of reference, they're a golf addict, but I don't think they really, it's not really talked about, and there is a lot of truth to that. As we were discussing here a little while ago, there are a lot of people who are addicted to golf, and they literally eat, sleep, and breathe. And I've been caught a little bit over the years in that trap as well. Now, obviously, as I've gotten a little older and a little more real about things, and don't get me wrong, I still have a great passion for the game. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing this.
Getting a little real about things, that's great.
Yeah, getting a little, real about things.
Right.
Well, it's just that there are so many other things in life that one should enjoy, and golf does in many ways mimic life. What I found really interesting is when you sort of articulated the two characters, throughout the book, especially in the early parts of the book, Carol is, and the reason I say this is obviously, both men and women are playing golf now, but if I was to go back in time when there were less women playing and more men, there were a lot of wives that would sort of scratch their heads, much like Carol did, and not understand what the fascination is, and I think you referenced this in the book early on that, chasing this stupid little white ball around, and
right.
I again, going to my own personal experiences in life, I've had people say that to me. I just don't get it. I don't understand what's so fascinating about this game, and I think that until somebody, sort of reaches for those clubs and gets out and actually, hits some golf balls, it's very difficult to describe that, but you've managed to do that in this book somehow, sort of explain how that addiction can happen. Because, as you indicate in the book, Tom was not somebody that was really interested in golf. In fact, didn't really think that. In fact, he was, if I remember correctly from the early part of the book, he was the one that actually made that reference that he just didn't understand the purpose, and he was sort of goaded into that. And just tell us a little bit about how he got into it. Just, again, we don't want to give out too much, but how he kind of got into the addiction.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to. Now, when I did the play, I had a monologue in the play that's not in the book, but this kind of happened to me, and it kind of is what happens to Tom in the book. Was that I went to a driving range on a lark. I was actually at my in-laws' house. It was a day or two after I got married, and I was bored out of my skull because they were sitting around talking about curtain fabric. And I was beside myself. I went, I can't. And my father-in-law said, look, there's a driving range down the street. Why don't you go down there and hit some balls? And I went, oh, that's an idea. And I took this old set of Wilson clubs he had in the garage, and I went down. And I did not know what I was doing. I was spraying balls all over the place. So I was lucky there was nobody there except me. And I was just hitting them all over the place and covered with sweat after a while and grass and bits of dirt. And I was using broken tees that I found in front of me. Finally, I took a 5-wood, and just sheer luck, I crushed one.
Yep.
And I bet I held that pose for a solid minute. And I thought, oh, my God, I've discovered the secret of golf. And, of course, I immediately lost it. But I spent the next, hour and a half just desperately trying to get it back. And I vowed to myself, all right, I'm going to get this game. God darn it, I'm going to get it. And I went home that night, and this was part of my monologue from the play, and I was lying in bed with my hands covered with blisters and my back and legs so stiff I could barely roll over and give my bride a hug. But I laid there, and I had my first full-blown golf fantasy. And instead of dreaming of blondes and redheads and brunettes, I was dreaming of a beautifully 250-yard drive hit off of an elevated tee down into an open fairway, a high lofted 5-iron landing on a soft, wet, undulating green, and the putts racing across the green and diving into the hole to the roar of the crowd that had now taken up permanent residence in my head. And I lay there really excited. And my wife rolled over and couldn't help but notice my excitement. And she said to me, "I bet I know what you're thinking." And I said, "I bet you don't." And that was, that's how I kind of got into it. I went, that's an interesting. But that's how I kind of got into golf myself. And that's how Tom gets into it.
It's very interesting, as I said, how you sort of start things off with the book, because it is, again, so true to life. As I said, when I got into golf, I was introduced, by my father at a very early age, from the age of 7. So it was sort of bred into me. But there were a lot of people who got into it later on in Tom, the character's case. Of course, it was as a result of in his business, it was sort of offered as a networking tool, if you will.
Right.
And once he got in there, he got hooked on it, and the story unfolds from there. But it's so interesting when I think. It really made me think. This is what was interesting about the book. Not only it was a great read and enjoyable and very funny. And obviously there were some moments throughout the book that you had to reflect on a more serious note. But what I found very interesting was it really depicted human nature and how we will grapple onto things sometimes for no reason. I mean, we'll take something in life that we would not give a second thought to, and for some reason it strikes a chord within us, and suddenly we can't let it go. And golf sometimes can mimic that, I've found, with some people. Not everybody, obviously, but some people where that addiction sort of takes over, that they'll start off with not having really much of an interest, but something that 250-yard shot, like you said, landing out in the middle of the fairway, and suddenly that person is coming back the next day and got two buckets of range balls and trying to see if they can recapture that same feeling that they had, once the day before.
Right.
And you really articulate that through this book, and that's, as I said, how the story sort of unfolds. You also mentioned, John, about the character Tom's spiritual journey on his own, and you mentioned Ben Hogan. Why Ben's spirit? What sort of drew you to have him as the spiritual guide in Tom's journey?
Well, there's a couple of answers to that. One was that notion, that idea came to me when I was doing the play, and I had this little play version, and I kind of created this character, Tom, and he would occasionally talk to Ben Hogan, even though Ben Hogan wasn't there, and it was all in Tom's head. And so I had that notion. Then it became a little more articulated when I started to write the book, and I thought, should I keep Ben Hogan, or should I go to Gary Casper, or who else should I use?
Right.
But Hogan, because of, and I read a lot of books on Hogan, and actually someday in the back of my mind I've sort of had this thought that I wouldn't mind doing a one-man show about Ben Hogan. I think he's such a fascinating character. But he was sort of, first of all, he was such a fierce competitor. He lived and breathed golf. He had no children, nothing to get in the way of his golf. It was going to be, this is how I'm going to be. I'm going to be the greatest golfer that ever lived. End of it. And he was one of the first guys to practice after a round of golf. Everyone else, Jack DeMeritt and all those guys were back in the clubhouse whacking them back. And Hogan was out on the practice range. And they would call out to him and say, "Ben, come on, let's have a cocktail." And he'd go, "I'll see you tomorrow, boys." And that's who he was. And instead of drinking alcohol, he drank ginger ale to make his fingertips softer. And I was like, the guy was like out there. And and it's all... Go ahead.
What I was going to add is it was also interesting too. Of course, everyone that's familiar with Ben Hogan's story, after he was injured in an accident, and really wasn't expected to walk ever again, he managed to push through that and became even a greater competitor afterwards. And it just really sort of attests to the drive. And it's almost really kind of like the character Tom in a way, that there came a point in time where his drive and his desire, and again, we don't want to give too much of it away, but really overtook. And that was kind of like Ben Hogan. So I could understand why you would want to choose Ben, because that was really kind of his spirit as well. Golf became
not only
so
that,
important.
but the story I love about Ben was that he gets on his first year on the tour, and then he quits because he can't compete. And he goes back home to Texas, and he's like a car or a tire salesman or something for a year, and he would lie in bed every night thinking about the swing, about the swing, about the swing. And when he finally woke up in the middle of the night one night and said, got it, and went back to the range and went to the range every day for 8 hours a day for 2 weeks, and then he went back on the tour. Now, to me, that's a really interesting story. It reveals a lot about a person. And I was like really taken with that. And I felt that's the kind of juice that Tom needs in his character. Now, on top of that, I will say that Hogan was known for, he had a sort of a taciturn part of his personality. And by that I mean he could be sharp-tongued, to say the least. And he had some really, really interesting retorts. And I thought, okay, good, I need a character in there, too, that is a no-nonsense talker. And somebody a little bit slick and a little bit smart, and it just came out that way. And and as you've read the book, there's some funny Hogan business in there. So that's how that sort of came out. It was fun. It was all fun.
It prodded Tom's character along too, which was there were moments when you would sense that Tom, a situation would arise, and you felt that he was experiencing some remorse, and of course the character would, the spirit, if you will, would sort of get him back on track of what he should be doing.
Right, he would chide him for having sensitive feelings, and it was.
Exactly. It was like you're not having any remorse, not if you want to, if your golf game improve. And really, it kind of goes to something a little deeper than that. I mean, in this case, you used sort of another character, if you will, or the spirit of a character to do that. But really, it's something that internally goes on in human beings. A lot of times we'll have that inner voice that will say, well, come on, just, and again, I'm using myself. I can remember, again, as a youngster, being out there and my fingers would kind of get a little blistered up and that, but that inner voice would sort of keep taunting me along and saying, you're never going to get any better. If you're going to pack up and go home now, you need to go and get yourself another bucket of balls and, be out here until, the wee hours. And that character that that character, Ben Hogan, kind of did that along the way. It was like he kept, every time, Tom would sort of waver from what his directive was, Ben would sort of be right there slipping in, comments and so forth to move him back on track. And you did that. Yeah, exactly. Now, you had some other interesting characters as well, which, again, were very relatable. Connie, Tank's wife, was again very typical of somebody who's been around, a lifelong golfer who knows what to expect from her husband, has sort of gone with the flow. And there's moments in the book where she sort of steps up and tries to guide. Of course, Tom's wife is in a bit of a kerfuffle of everything going on. And there's moments in the book where she tries to set her at ease that this is, honey, this is the way life goes, and, get over yourself type of thing. And so you brought that in. So what was your thinking in doing that aspect of it as well? Like, why did, again, you're obviously drawing from some personal experiences, I'm sure, but when you put these different characters together, what was sort of your overall vision? What, you obviously didn't want to just have Tom, but you brought other characters that played a very crucial role throughout the book. Give us a little bit of insight there.
Yeah, it was. That's a great question because and it's kind of it's sort of a writing question in a way. You can't. The book becomes boring if it's only about two people, and if you are going to bring somebody else onto the stage or into the book, they have to be as equally fleshed out and equally empathetic as the other characters. So you have to spend a lot of time, and I took a lot of time with Connie in particular. I love Connie. She's a wreck. She's a mess. And what I really wanted was, I wanted Tom in a right from the get-go. I wanted him in a really stable, happy marriage to a really great gal.
Mm-hmm.
If Carol becomes a nag about his golf, there's the threat that she can become unattractive and unempathetic character, and I didn't want
right.
that. So, but I wanted to give that to somebody, and so I gave it to Connie. And I said, okay, Connie's going to be the angry, bitter golf widow. And then I drew that parameter and said, and go anywhere you want with it, John. Anywhere. Take her anywhere you want. When I did the play, this is a fun story actually. I did the play with an actress and a director who knew nothing about golf. Nothing. And while we were rehearsing it, they would say to me, is this funny? I go, trust me, it's funny. It's funny. And then we were performing the play, and I'll give you an example. The female actress becomes Connie's character for a moment, and she played both Connie and Carol. And Carol walks into the woman's house and says, "Oh, that sofa, that's an interesting upholstery. What color is that?" And Connie's character takes a long drag on a cigarette, blows out a billow of smoke, and says, "That's Augusta Green. Jack picked it out." And the audience howled, and the woman, the actress, turned to me. I was standing in the wings and looked at me and went, "Damn, I don't know what I just said, but it's funny." And I had another line in the play where as Tom's character, and we all know this moment in golfers where they come home from a round of golf and either they're really pumped because they had a great round, or they're really dejected because they had a bad round. And they have to share their good round with everybody. And I've been guilty of that myself. I'll come home and I'll try to go hole by hole, and my wife will just look at me and hold up a finger and say, "One hole." I'll listen to one hole. And and in the play, I had a line where my character came in, Tom, and he comes home and he says, "Oh, you should have seen it. My 7-iron went way up in the air. It went way up in the air. And when it hit the green, it had backspin. I got backspin, honey." And she's leaning in her chair and she goes, "Oh, my God, who gives a shit?" And the audience went wild. And the actress again looked at me and said, "Are you kidding? This is funny. This is golf. It's funny." And that's how that came to be. That's how all of that nonsense came to be.
And that's what really made it, helped to make it equally interesting. Because you're right. I think if you had have stuck with just the two main characters, you can certainly have some fun with that, and it would be relatable to so many people. But you really introduced a cast of characters throughout the book that was so true to life. And I'll give you an example of what I'm referring to. As the story progresses, of course, Tom becomes involved with a group of golfers that on a regular basis. And, each of the characters obviously has their own unique personalities. And I could see how so many of the fellow golfers out there and that get into different foursomes like that there's a little bit of for instance, Tank, there's a little bit of his character in somebody's, within their foursome, and you had some other characters as well. One was a doctor, and some of the humor that came out of there, and then of course in this particular case you had a priest who was also sharing some interesting tales as well. And just the way that they sort of melted together into this foursome was really, I could see that so clearly in so many people that I personally know, like you said earlier, very relatable, with that. And golf is funny that way. And so when you were putting this together, how long did it take you to sort of come up with these different characters, and what was, again, sort of your vision? How did you sort of put each of them in place?
Well, first of all, let me just say it took me about 3.5 years to write the novel from start to finish. And that was writing it out, probably maybe 370 pages was the first draft, and then writing it over and over. I wrote it 15 different times. And that's not including the little sections I had to go in and fix, and then fix that one, then fix that one, and go back and look at that character, and go back and look at that character, and did that character make sense with that character? And then go back and write it again and do it again. And I only know that I did it 15 times because I got 15 copies of the file on my computer. So I knew that, oh my God, I'm on round 15. Somebody shoot me. And I think that if I had known that it was going to take me so long when I first started, I never would have started it. But that being said, and I know this is true for you and every other golfer, that there are certain people, and they're not necessarily, I don't really have a foursome that I play with, but there are certain people that I do like to play with. And I do like to play with them not necessarily because they're good golfers. I usually try to play with people who are remotely on the same level as me. But there are people that are really interesting to talk to while you're out there playing. And I found that over the years that there was a couple of local townsfolk politicians that I like playing with because they know all the gossip and they know all the dirt. There's believe it or not, there's a policeman who lives on my street. Great guy. And I love playing with him every now and again because you get all the dirt, all the things in a small town that you don't know anything about and never makes it to the newspapers, and it kind of dribbles out in the course of a round. I love that. To me, I just find that fascinating. And and that's how I sort of constructed those characters. I wanted to find people that Tom would find fascinating. And not necessarily about golf, because here's one of the things about the book, and I think you'll notice too if you read it. Almost none of the book takes place on the golf course. And I always felt that writing a book about fictional. I mean, what could be more boring for a really avid golfer than to read about fictional golf? I can barely watch it on TV. When I'm watching it on TV, all I want to do is run out the door and go play. And it's true. I mean, that's a sign of my addiction is that I cannot sit through a showing of the Masters without leaving my house and going over to hit a bucket of balls in the middle of it. I just can't do it. So now I DVR the whole thing and I just watch it at night when I can't go out. But that's how I came up with those characters. I wanted Tom to play with people that were not necessarily about golf, but about life and about things that we find kind of funny and interesting. And that's what I did. So I made one a priest, one a gynecologist, one a plumber, and Tom. And that was
what was also interesting too, John, was sort of the marriage, if you will, of the characters. And as an example, very early on, of course, as you're sort of unfolding each of their personalities and they're telling some of these different tales and stories along the way, Tom's a little bit apprehensive to sort of, fit into the fold. He's not sure how to react, how to take it, and there's certain situations, like you said, they're telling stories and talking about things that they probably shouldn't be telling. And at first he's very apprehensive to sort of, feel comfortable in that. But then as time goes on and as the story progresses, he realizes that, if he wants to pursue this and continue to play, he's going to have to sort of fit in the group. So it's kind of a way of really, it's more than just somebody becoming addicted to golf. It's a bit of a personal journey because it's changing his personality as well and making him become a different person than what he was, because his conscience sort of takes over. And as you articulate in the book, there's moments that are in that early stage of his connection with these golfers where he sort of questions like, geez, should you be telling that? Should I be, that sort of thing.
Here's the thing about golf, and this probably goes true with guys who get together every weekend and play soccer or softball or anything else. I think all of us guys yearn to have, at least periodically, a taste of the camaraderie we had when we were in high school and college, the bravado, for lack of a better word, the bullshit that we used to shoot with each other.
Yeah.
We lose that as we get older. We spend a lot of time with our kids and our wives. We lose that sense, that feeling of laughing until we cried. I remember being in college and laughing until I cried. And if I could just get together with a group of guys, and more often than that, it happens to me when I'm on the golf course. and I'm out with guys that I know really well, and we're tugging on each other really hard and just busting each other up. And I go, this is what it felt like when I was back in the dormitory. This is what it felt like when I was younger. And I think we all yearn for that. And so to create those relationships, that's what I was trying to do. And I think I actually mentioned that at some point in the book. That
yes, you did.
He understands that he's doing this for a reason. And yes, the conversations that they have would make a normal guy somewhat uncomfortable, but he also appreciates it for the sophomoric level that it is. And he wants to go back to that sophomoric level a little bit. Just get a taste. That's all. And that's what he does. That's how I came up with that little conceit, if you will.
I wanted to read out just one little, in the book, Tom, we talked about this off air briefly, and I don't want to, as I said, I'm not going to give out too much of the story because I think it's something that, I want the listeners to get a copy of this book, and I want them to sort of experience. But there's something, the main character, Tom, of course, begins in his early stages, writing a journal of his experiences. And there's one journal entry, it's number 11, and he's talking about, and I'm sure you recall this when I read it, it's just a short one here, but it starts out this way, and it says, Carol's been pestering me to build a sandbox for the boys. Of course, Tom and Carol have two young boys, boys in the backyard. Like I have time for that. And then he thinks for a second, I know what I'll do. I'll make it big enough so I can practice bunker shots out of it. Perfect. Like she'll know the difference. And when I read that, and I started, and obviously there were some other journal entries as well that had similar tones, but what it made me really think about is the wheels are turning, and many, many guys, and I'm sure you can relate to this, John, guys think like that.
Right.
When it comes to those types of tasks, if they can find a way to benefit them like this, I don't want to go out and build a sandbox for the boys. Well, wait a minute. If I make it big enough, I can practice my bunker shots. And I can see that those wheels turning. And that's what really caught me is the types of entries that you put in here. It does make you think, I could see myself doing that. Or if not me personally, I know somebody, Joe down the street that I, golf with occasionally, that's what he did.
Right.
Right.
There's a guy who lives down the street from me too. The policeman, as a matter of fact, he built a green on his front lawn, and that line in particular, I remember. I probably had this in the book where he chides his children for not raking the bunker when they're done playing with their Tonka trucks. Did you play in the sandbox? Did you rake it? I felt, but yes. Guys do, it's a guy thing. We do, our wife tells us one thing, and then we sort of morph it to make it fit our agenda. And we do it almost without thinking, I think. I think we think that we're really clever, although they see through us pretty much most of the time. I got my daughter to play golf, and we started, I took her out, and I took her out, and I took her out, and she actually kind of took to it, which was really a delight for me. And I came home one evening from my daughter. We went out and played 6 holes after dinner and then came home. And my daughter ran up to finish her homework, and I walked into the den, and my wife looked up at me and said, "Don't think I know what you're doing." I started laughing. It's like she had the whole thing already thought out. I'm getting my daughter to play so I can play more. I mean, that was like, that was her accusation. And she was partly right. But, yeah.
Well, sure. There's always, there's always got to be some kind of an angle, and that again, you get into that in the book in several cases where, Tom has to sort of, find a way to perpetuate his addiction, and so he will make adjustments in order, and that's throughout the book. He makes several adjustments in his daily routine in order to accommodate this addiction, and it is literally an addiction that he is engulfed with. And it's just funny that, again, when you think about that in real life situations, it is so true, because there are so many people out there, as we've talked about, that will go to great lengths in order to satisfy that addiction. In this particular case, it's golf. Obviously there are other addictions out there, but in this particular case, it's golf. But it can be also just as damaging, as an addiction to drugs or alcohol. because
right.
And even though you've made this into a funny thing, the truth of the matter is it can be a life-changing, as we find out through the book, experience. And there are a lot of people out there that have gone through this change. And as I said earlier, as I've gotten older, I've started to get a little real with myself. And I'm like you. I mean, I enjoy certainly watching the tournaments and things like that, but I'm not to the same degree that I once did. I would rather be out playing. It certainly, spurs me to want to play more than to sit in front of the box and watch, watch Freddie Couples or Tiger Woods or somebody else sink that putt when I can go out in the range and or up to the course and do it myself and get the enjoyment out of it. But
exactly.
Now, was there, when you were writing this book and putting things together and gathering the information of their characters, is there anything that you wish that you had have done differently? I mean, I think everybody in reflection thinks, well, I wish I had made this character a little bit more. So, but was there anything in the story or an area of the story that you wish you may have expanded on more, but were afraid that the book was going to get too big and it was going to get lost in there? Is there anything that you wish you had have sort of thrown in there, like the kitchen sink?
I'll tell you the truth. When I finished the book, and I think it was around 360 pages, and when I pulled a book out of the bookcase, this is literally how I did it. I pulled a book out of the bookcase, and I found one that was about 360 pages, and I realized it was so thick that no golfer I know would read it. Do you know what I mean? It was too big.
Yeah.
And so I had to go back in, and I chopped out about 100 pages of the book. And to be perfectly honest, it broke my heart. There were certain sections, certain little gems. In writing, we call it killing your babies. That it just broke my heart to take those little bits out. At the end of the day, I think it was the right thing to do. I've had more than several readers contact me, and one of their comments was it ended too quickly, that they'd wanted a little bit more. And I guess in entertainment, that's how you're supposed to leave it. You're supposed to leave them wanting a little bit more. So I have a feeling it turned out to be the right move, but let me tell you, it broke my heart. I was like, there were certain scenes to take out. It just killed me. It killed me. But they had to go because it was, what the rule of thumb was, does it advance the story? And I had to go through the entire manuscript and go, does this advance the story? Does this advance the story? And if it didn't, it had to go. And so there were all these little side stories that I had to take out that were, So that was my regret. Other than that,
there's a lot of areas. Yeah, there's a lot of areas in the book too where, as I said, you sort of jump from one scene to the next, and then you'll come back to that previous scene and sort of it's almost like you're finishing the thought. And it was kind of interesting because there were a few areas in the book. There was one particularly which I don't want to give this out because it's something that I think people have to read, but it's difficult. This is one of the things that's very difficult about doing this type of show when you're talking about a book, because you don't want to give away all the little the nooks and crannies of it, but it's very tempting to want to share this with the listeners. So I apologize, of course, to my listeners out there that are wanting to know a little bit more. But you need to go and get a copy of the book, and I promise you. There you go.
That's the perfect answer right there.
Yeah, it truly is, and John, I really have to give you credit for this. I've had the pleasure of reading a lot of different books and hearing a lot of different stories, and certainly some written books out there. But this was really very refreshing, for what you traditionally see on a shelf in Barnes and Noble or something like that, and you see in the golf, and it's nothing but instruction. And listen, I'm a golf instructor, but even I get sick of reading a lot of that stuff all the time because it's just a lot of it just gets regurgitated. So this was kind of nice. It was refreshing. It was completely unexpected and not what I really expected. The different twists and turns throughout the story.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of things that were very, very relatable. And
well,
what I was thinking to myself is,
I can't thank you enough for saying that. It is so gratifying when you spend all that time and you put all that effort in to get someone to read it and read it for what I meant it to be. It really is. I really can't tell you how grateful I am to hear that.
Well, and I was thinking to myself, and this was going to be a question I was going to ask you. I know obviously I have a paperback copy here, but is this also, or is there a plan, if it's not currently, to make it in an audio form?
I would like to do that down the road. I haven't really given it much consideration yet. I'd like to see the book take off on a little bit more of a solid basis before I invested that kind of time and effort to do that.
Right.
But yes, I would love to do that myself, quite frankly.
Well, the reason why I say that is as much as I do enjoy reading books and things like that. I'm a big avid fan of audiobooks. And
I've heard that a lot from a lot of guys who are salesmen who drive in their car all day long, and they want to listen to something, and I've heard that a lot. I wish, and hopefully with any luck it'll be there.
Yeah, I could really see this. The only I think the only caution I would if you do this is you're going to have to figure out a way of not causing any accidents on the interstates, because I can see there's going to be moments where you're going to get caught up in the story and suddenly burst out in laughter and not being while driving through the hills of Tennessee and not recognizing that transport that's coming up.
That's a hell of a selling point. I would put it on audio, but I'm thinking of you. I like that.
Exactly. It's a fabulously written book, John. I can't emphasize that enough, and I'm going to certainly make sure that I get the links and so forth up on my website. Now that I've had you on the program, and I certainly want to wish you much continued success with the book, and I'll be more than happy to plug this. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a great read, and I hope that you do get it out on audio. I think it'd be a fantastic. I love to, my partner Carol and I love to take trips, and her Carol is spelled with an E on the end, not as you put it in the book, but she kind of reminded me a little bit of your character, because she's often said to me she doesn't understand golf and so forth, and so I try to explain to her from time to time, but she's getting there. But we enjoy a good road trip every year, and I could see, from the traditional sort of mystery, listening to something like this. So I hope that you are able to successfully transfer that into an audio. I think it'd be a great audiobook.
Well, one thing I have heard a lot of from different readers, and a lot of the reviews on Amazon and stuff, are people saying to me, when are you going to do the movie? And that's something that I would really love to sink my teeth into. I think it would be hilarious, but...
Now, taking that in mind, and because you have the true vision of what's in this book, and obviously let's try to use some characters, that people would recognize. If you had the opportunity I think this is going to be a great question. If you had the opportunity, John, to take this into a full-fledged movie, who could you see playing some of the characters? And particularly the two main characters, who could you see that's out there maybe right now that people could recognize that you think would fit the bill?
That's a great question, and I've had this conversation with fantasy conversation with my wife on a number of occasions, and I'm trying to think now. You kind of caught me on the spot, but I would think, I would like the person who plays the characters, Tom or Father Charlie, to be actual golfers. I think that just as an example, Jack Nicholson likes to play golf, and at this stage of his career, he could probably play tank pretty good. I thought that, and I'm trying to think now of a good character actress to play Connie. Somebody really loud and abrasive and sharp-tongued and full of rancor. And I'm trying to think. There's a couple out there that I had. It's out of my head. But for Tom, I would think somebody like Mark Wahlberg, who I know happens to be a big golfer, and he could probably play him pretty well. Ray Romano could play him pretty well.
Yeah.
There's any number of guys. But as I said, my big thing is I know that there's a bunch of guys out there who are really addicted to golf out in Los Angeles that would just sink their teeth into those roles. Samuel Jackson, is a big golfer. And again, he'd be hilarious. There'd be some really funny Joe Pesci, all those guys. You could go right down the pike with that, and come up with any number of people who could really hit it out of the park. But yeah, that is a fun conversation. I do like that.
Yeah, it really makes you think. You could see. I could see this really coming into a movie, and I think they've obviously done a lot of golf movies out there, but again, they've always they did one on Hogan and some of the other ones that were out there, but
right.
This would I think would really be interesting for two reasons, because it does obviously it's going to appeal to anybody that eats and breathes and sleeps golf, but there's enough storyline in there that would appeal to non-golfers as well. From the comedic standpoint, there's a lot of very funny situations that married couples could relate to and understand. And
right,
my husband's like that, or I know exactly.
The bulk of the comedy. I think the bulk of the comedy comes in the husband and wife relationship, and where somebody is saying that he's going to do one thing and he's actually going to do something else entirely. And I find that to be kind of funny. And particularly when the other person suspects, it becomes sort of like this little intrigue going on in the relationship. And I think that's the root of a tremendous amount of the comedy in the story. Is right in the beginning when Tom comes home and he's slathered with sunscreen, and Carol is sniffing him like a dog. Like, where have you been?
Yeah.
And wives are like that. If you go out and you have a couple of martinis at lunch, they know that at dinner time. And don't you think they don't know it?
Oh, I know.
I just love that stuff. I just love that chemistry in a relationship. I think it's great.
And when I reflect back on your book, when I really truly analyze it, it's really not a book about golf.
No.
Golf is really the vessel that you're using to sort of navigate the story, but it's really about relationships, and it's about the different journeys that your character takes. Golf is, as I said, just sort of a vessel that you've used to sort of transport these characters through the story. But really, as you said, like most of the story, very little of it, in fact, actually takes place on the golf course. Obviously, there's a lot of golf reference, and there's a lot of...
the golf is really is what binds these people together. And I think that's what, and that to me is what was really interesting about golf. And, there's so many books out there. Again, people ask me, why did you write about this? And I said, well, there are so many books out there that are written about, Daddy and his son walking down the beautiful fairway as he ruffles little Timmy's hair and teaches him the lessons of life through golf. I've heard that ad nauseum. I can't hear it anymore. And, what I want to hear is I want to hear the truth. I want to hear what really happens. The truth is that we lead an interesting life with our wives and our friends, and it's not always as pretty as we would like to think it is. But it is funny when you take it outside of itself and look at it, and all you have to do is exaggerate it just a little bit, and it's hilarious.
Yeah.
And it's like taking reality and just putting it under the slightest magnification, and you're off to the races. And I think that's really, you're right. That's really what I was attempting to try to do with the story, was not write a story about golf, but make it about what is it about golf that makes us different, and what is it about golf that puts us into a situation that would be considered comical. The Irish have a great expression. It would be tragic if it weren't so funny. And I love that. I think that's, there it is, And, but that's really all I was really trying to do with the story. And it's funny, so many things came out in the book that were, at least from the outset, unintentional. That the story would become a story about relationships. I'm not sure I really intended that when I first picked up the notion of doing it. It sort of evolved as it went. And the more I dug, the deeper I got, and the deeper I got, the more I liked it. So it was it was that thing. And then I get people like yourself who, and again, I can't tell you how gratifying it is to hear it, who see all of that and enjoy all of that for what it is when they read it and go, oh, this is what this book is about. It's not about that. It's about this, and it's also about that, and then there's something else in there. And I kind of like that. I really, I'm quite pleased.
Well, it sort of draws you in. For a non-golfer, of course, you look at the title and you're thinking, okay, Sweet Spot, Confessions of a Golfaholic. And right away you're thinking, okay, this is some sort of, it's not necessarily a novel. You're not sure what it is, especially if you don't understand golf. But if you're a golfer, you know that this is not an instructional book. You're not going to learn anything about your golf game per se, but it's obviously a story. But once you get into the pages and start to unfold and peel back and I hate to use this analogy, but to sort of peel back the layers of the onion, if you will, in the story in this case, you really start to see it's really not about golf at all. It's about the relationships and how we relate to one another and some of the things that as humans we will do in different situations. And it's funny again with some of the things that goes on with the different characters that Tom. Not just the main characters that he deals with early on in the story, but as he progresses through his journey, some of the different characters that he comes across and how his life changes and is affected. And again, golf is sort of the primary vessel that he uses and that binds the story together, but it really is about so much more. And those, to me, in my experiences, are the truly great stories where it's not always what it seems on the surface. There's more to it.
Right. And again, I'm not even 100% sure that was my original intention when I first set out. I saw these things start to sort of unfold as I did it. For example, it's really how we, as an adult, we have admitted that we have thoughts that we don't necessarily share with even the people who are closest to us. We get a thought in our head, and our wife says she wants me to do one thing. I'll do it, but I'm going to do it in a way that satisfies my own greed or lust or whatever, and keeps her happy at the same time. So we admit that happens. Just as we admit, as Tom meets a character later on in the book who's a complete wacko, and yet there's a moment in Tom's brain, just the slightest little shiver runs down his spine, as it happens to us too, I think, on a daily basis sometimes, where we meet someone who we go, God, I hope I don't look like that. And I think that, when you can put that kind of moment into a story and make it work, it's great. It's just great. And it also, I think, allows the reader, hopefully anyway, to feel like the author is talking to me like an adult. And not trying to talk to me like, spoon feed me or give me some pablum that I'll just like, that he's actually talking to me like a real adult. That was part of the reason I left a lot of salty language in the book, because I wanted people to go, oh, he's talking to me like a grown-up, not like Jim Nantz has to talk on television. I'm not going to talk like that, because that's not how I talk, and that's not how my friends on the golf course talk either.
It's almost like, and I can't speak because I don't know him personally, but it's almost like maybe what Jim Nantz might say if the mic was turned off.
Well, we all talk like that when the mic is turned off, and when we get caught talking like that when the mic is accidentally turned on, we get red in the face because we don't want people to know that.
It kind of reminds me. It reminds me of, I'll tell you who this reminds me of, who is a little bit more, obviously the expletives don't fly on television, but it reminds me a little bit of Johnny Miller. Johnny Miller is, and I'm sure if you watch a lot of golf, you know obviously who he is, but in his announcing days, he's always been very honest in his assessments, but he's also very critical, and he tells it like it is. If he thinks somebody game stinks, he'll tell you, and that's really what I've noticed in your book. You come right out and you hold no punches. Right from the first two words. And I'm not going to say them, but the first two words in the book, pretty much summarized that up, that this is how, in a real world, this is how life is sometimes, that sometimes your emotions get the better of you. That's how we truly speak. And throughout the book, it's used in such a way, and here's why, I guess the point I'm trying to make. I don't have a problem if something like that is, and obviously I'm talking about specific language, I don't have a problem if it's put in a book, if it's used in its proper context and is trying to sell something. If it's done entirely for shock value, which sometimes people tend to do, then I have no use for it because it doesn't have a place in the story. But
no, it's like, when you listen to a comedian, if you listen to a comedian who uses really foul language for shock value, it takes the pleasure out of it.
Right.
And also, if you'll note that in the those first two words in the book, they are not spoken; they are thought. He thinks.
Yeah.
And again, I've always written and I've always tried to communicate thoughts that most people think but would not say. And to me, that's always been the germ of my comedy. It's always been what has tickled me. And I actually heard somebody on, I don't know where I heard this now, and it escapes me, but somebody was talking about writing. And they said, write what pleases you. Write what pleases you. If it makes you laugh, then write it that way. And so I tried to stay true to that concept. Mm-hmm. That if I was sitting at my computer and I wrote something and it made me laugh, okay, keep it. Don't try to change it to soften it or lighten it or do anything else. Just leave it the way it is. And the beauty is, and I'm so happy that I did it that way, is because I've had reactions like yours where people have said, wow, that was really funny. And I really got it because it sounded so real. And so that was very successful for me. I was really happy with that. It was a little risky, but I felt it was worth it. Just kind of leave it the way it is. That was the way it was meant to be. But yeah,
and it does. It's very relatable. And as I said, the language that sometimes throughout the book that you've used, whether it's in a thought, as you said, or whether he's blurting it out in some form, it's appropriate for the circumstances, and it's something, especially in golf, like you said, you've hit a bad shot, and they're wrapping their club around the tree, and the expletives are flying out. That happens in real life. So not to have that in place, it kind of would do it a disservice or an injustice, because that's how people think, and that's how people react in a situation like that. Now, when you're, as you were telling the story to me earlier off air, when you, had that sort of well-struck shot, you would sort of strike the pose. And that's true as well. With somebody that's taking up the game or somebody that's first starting out particularly, and even those that have been well-seasoned, have played for many, many years, that's what brings us back.
That's what brings us back. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, there'll be people that'll go out and are lucky if they can, break 90, but they'll go out on that course that particular Sunday or what have you. They'll hit that one perfect drive or that one, shot close to the pin or long putt, what have you, and that'll be enough to sort of hook them in that they'll be out next Sunday.
Oh, yeah. There's no question about it. To me, that is the most alluring thing about golf, is that if you can stand in the middle of a fairway and hit a flush right on the screws 5-iron that goes exactly where you wanted it to go, I really don't know of any other greater physical pleasure than that. It just feels that awesome. And it's like hitting a home run. What the beauty of hitting a home run is that the ball hangs in the air for 2 or 3 seconds. So that moment, that flush feeling, it lasts. And what is it? Well, it's your entire body turning and striking and moving in perfect coordination like a dancer, like just a perfect dance move, wham, and hit the ball and just watch it take off. It just feels on every level, mentally and physically, fantastic. And I think that was one of the things I tried to convey as to what leads us to that addiction. Because you see people who go to the driving range and they'll just hit ball after ball after ball after ball, and we all know what they're looking for. They're looking for that one shot that they can finish their bucket of balls and go, good, I got one. I mean, hopefully if they get better, they'll have more than one. But, you know that that's what they're looking for. And I found that to be,
Yeah, something that I've witnessed, and I'm sure you have, and I'm sure many of the listeners out there that have played for any length of time, I'm sure have all witnessed this over the years, especially if you've gone to a driving range. And one of the interesting things, I'm an observer. I like to watch people. I find it interesting to see, people's mannerisms and things. And one thing I've always noticed over the years, going up to a driving range, is if somebody has been there for a little while and they've been hitting balls, and you've got your usual left, right, and occasional, straight ball.
Right.
But every once in a while, when they hit that perfect shot, you'll see that sort of almost that exhilaration in their face. And this is something, and here's the point I'm trying to make. I will see somebody go through an entire bucket of balls, and they'll finish off, or they'll hit that one good shot, and then they'll look over towards the pro shop or what have you,
right.
And you can tell what's going in their mind. They're thinking, do I grab another bucket, or do I end it on that good note? And it's funny because if they don't end it on that good note, they're very quickly shuffling back to their vehicle. They're throwing the clubs in the trunk and kicking their shoes off, and they're gone. But if they've hit that pure shot, like you said, they will look over, and it's funny because I've seen people do that. I've seen people that will hit a bucket or even two buckets of balls, and you think, okay, man, you're done for the day. Go home and and come out another day. But they'll hit that one or two.
Apologize to your wife.
Yeah, exactly. But they'll hit that that one or two shots, and you'll hear the wheels turning. I know if I just stay out here for another half an hour or 45 minutes, I know I can get that shot down right. And we've all done that. Yeah. I don't care what level you're at. The pros will even tell you that there's a certain satisfaction, a certain exhilaration that they get from that well-struck shot. And I've known people that have, I've known people that have wanted to throw their clubs in the pond and never touch, the sport again with a 10-foot pole, but they'll hit that pure drive out there. And suddenly, they're back at it again, as I said, next weekend. And that's what really makes it fun and interesting to be part of this game.
That's right. And that's what also makes it fun when you're out with a gang of guys that you've known for a long time, and you can share the ups and downs of those shots. It's I hate to use the word, but it's a blast. I have a blast when I'm out playing with a group like that. And I haven't had a blast since I was back in college. That's the moment I'm looking for. When I have that, when my son was young, and we would have those moments of really great fun, it didn't really matter what we were doing. But when we were having a blast together, you could see it in his eyes that this is the greatest fun I've ever had. And that's what I think people get when they're playing golf, playing it the right way with the right people and having a good time. But to go back to the person on the driving range, I will say this, and I will admit to this, that when I look back at the pro shop after a really good shot, I'm looking to see if anybody happened to see how good I was.
Thinking of the senior
That's
tour?
Me, baby.
Yeah.
That's me.
I think
I'll
we've
do
all,
a little twirl
we've all
with the
done
club
that.
and wee, look at me.
Yeah. I used to quite often, I don't as much anymore, but I used to go to some of the PGA events, and I'd watch these guys out in the range, and when I was a youngster, as I said, and it was really amazing how effortless that they would make it. And of course, then you get out to the range. Now, obviously, I've gotten to a level in my game where I'm able to have that same feeling. Maybe not quite to the same extent as some of them, but I've certainly been able to experience that more and more as I've gotten older and gotten more experience and a better player. And I try to sort of articulate that to some of the students that I work with. But as a youngster going to some of these tournaments and watching these guys, it was just amazing just to watch them hit these balls, because you could just tell, to you and I, we would see them hitting a shot and think, wow, this is fantastic. But you could tell by the expressions on their face if they were pleased or not.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
no,
you could
you
see
and I
that.
You and I would be
ecstatic.
so happy. We would be so happy with the shots that they were hitting if we were hitting them ourselves.
Right.
But they're really about precision. There's precision. And so that's a whole different level. You're just like, oh, my God. You were talking about going to the driving range. My favorite experience of all time, and you talk about watching human behavior, and I, too, am a real aficionado of watching people. And I went to, what did I go to? I went to the U.S. Open at Winged Foot,
right,
like 4 or 5 years ago. And what's the Spanish guy's name with the ponytail and they call him the mechanic?
Oh,
Jose.
Yeah.
What the heck?
Jimenez.
Jimenez, right. Now,
yeah.
Have you ever seen him warm up on a driving range?
Yes.
It's a show. It's like a carnival act.
Yeah.
It's really great. It's really great. He comes out with a huge cigar. There's always a billow of smoke around his head. And he does these wonderful exercises with each arm where he twirls the club like a baton with his right hand, and then he does it again with his left hand. And then he does these great stretching exercises. The whole time, a cloud of smoke around his head. It is fabulous to watch. It's a whole show. And then
it's funny that you mention him. Yeah, it's funny you mention him because I don't ever remember seeing him without a cigar.
Oh, he's fabulous. I love that guy.
Yeah.
Because he's a showman. And that's what I think is really interesting. That's what I think is a really interesting. People who can take their golf game and turn it into a show are interesting people. And the shows are usually, because they're such conservative in the way that they behave, at least that's the way they were trained. And so the behavior it's like a little tick sometimes for most people. He goes way overboard, and I love it. I love it when he does it. But
I used to. Go ahead.
No, well, I'm trying to think. I can't remember the guy. I can't remember the golfer's name. Who was in the playoff with Tiger? The older guy who they were out in California at the U.S. Open out there. What was his name? What's his name?
Oh,
shoot.
You're not talking about when he in 08 when he was up against Rocco Mediate, yeah.
Yeah, I love Rocco. Rocco's great because he was like from a different era, and his belt buckle was about 6 inches higher than Tiger's, and all of these different things that made me. I loved that. To me, that was really entertaining to watch. It was like my next door neighbor playing Tiger Woods. That's what it was like. That's what it looked like. And it was really fun to watch. That was one of the most exciting rounds of golf I ever saw.
Well, and that certainly was. What I find interesting as well, and over the years, I've watched a lot of golf. As I said, I don't watch as much as I used to, just because I'm obviously busy with other things. But one of the things that I do really miss is exactly what you're talking about. Is the golfers of today I found are so much more mechanical that there's almost, and I don't want to say this because I know it's going to sound as a criticism, but it's almost like they're lacking in personality. There doesn't seem to be. I mean, some of them might dress differently in that, but you had players like Seve Ballesteros and Lee Trevino and Arnold Palmer and some of these that were Chichi Rodriguez that were true showmen, and it was a true joy to and it's not that I don't enjoy watching some of these guys hit some pure shots today, but I find that they're more focused on the mechanics of the golf swing and that sort of perfection, where the others, it was almost like a novel in itself unfolding, especially if you watch something like Lee Trevino. I mean,
that's right.
I can remember, and I've told on the program here in the past, stories of watching him, and I watched him live years ago up at the Canadian Open, and I mean, it was quite the spectacle. But it was interesting. It was fun. It made him, almost to the point where even though he was a professional golfer, you kind of felt like he was your neighbor almost, because he was just so down to earth, and it wasn't really, it was a showman. It was almost like you were being entertained. And now it seems to have gotten so serious that the tone out there is just not. And I think that's why I don't enjoy watching it as much. I enjoy actually watching the ladies on the LPGA more than I do some of the guys on the PGA, because it's gotten too mechanical, and it just.
I could not agree with you more. I watch the LPGA. In fact, I'm taping the LPGA in Australia right now so I can watch it when we get off the phone. But you're exactly right. Now, why do you think that change occurred? Because I have my own theory as to why that change occurred. Because I grew up probably about the same time you did and saw the same players.
Right.
And I used to love watching Seve Ballesteros because you didn't know where his ball was going to go.
Yeah. And there was always passion in their play. Well, I think there's a couple. Yeah, there's a couple of factors, I think, and I talked about this actually last week with my guest PGA teaching pro Tom Patry was on, and we talked a little bit about. And I think one of the things, as an example, let's start with the men for a second. I know we're getting away from your book here, and I don't want to
that's all right.
Take away, but one of the things that I've noticed in probably at least the last decade is the changes in the equipment have made it so much that they've really reduced the PGA Tour. They're not shot makers anymore. It's, you whip out your big driver and you hit it, 290 or 310 or whatever it happens to be, and now you might be left with a wedge or a 9-iron into the green. And so they've really taken it to a point where, even though they've got 14 clubs in the bag, there's probably only about 3, maybe 4 clubs in most cases that they're actually using. Obviously in a par 3 it's a little bit different situation, but there's a lot of clubs that they're not really utilizing because they're taking them out of play. Now on the ladies' side, one of the things that I've noticed is they're more interested in that short game. 140, 130 yards in is where the ladies excel. Now, even though the men's stats might be slightly higher, that's just because of brute force and what. The ladies are not far behind in their short games. They're just so meticulous, and they use pretty much all the clubs in their bag because they have to. And it just makes it more interesting because they have to be more creative. The guys today, I just find, are not as creative. It's all mechanics. It's all about getting it into that exact plane and
right.
The stack and tilt. That type of thing. And I think that's what's happened is it's taken away somebody's ability to be a shot maker in the sport. It's now put it into sort of a biomechanical type swing, and
I agree.
There's no personality behind it.
I agree on the level that the game has become driver pitching wedge, and it's not really exciting to watch
right.
that. But in terms
right.
of the personalities coming into the game, my theory is this: that once you got to the level where you were bringing sports psychologists into
yep.
finding a mental zone in which you can strike a golf ball, and what their psychologists are basically telling them is, okay, we're going to make your mind a complete blank. And from that blank, we're going to envision a golf shot. So you've taken
mm-hmm.
all of your personality out of the game. So that's one thing, and I think it's a very big thing. And you watch these guys, they have no personal demeanor on the golf course. I hate to say it, but Ben Hogan didn't either. He never spoke
right.
a word to his opponents when he played golf. It was dead silent. I'm thinking about one thing and one thing only. I can't
mm-hmm.
say that that's really entertaining to watch. Secondly, the purses are so large, there's so much money involved that
yeah.
they can't do anything but be dead serious about $1.5 million.
Yeah.
It's nothing that you can sneeze at anymore. The money is so huge, and they don't. It's not like, I'm going to get in my car and drive down to Texas and be in a golf tournament. They have an entourage. They've got like their masseuse.
Yeah.
They've got their psychologist. They've got their guy who's going to give them a back rub. They got the guy who's going to draw blood after the thing and make sure he doesn't have a virus
yeah.
and make sure that his vitamin levels are perfect. And you know what I mean? It's like it's a whole different game now. And to me, that's what has made it rather boring to watch. I look at these guys and go, it doesn't excite me very much. But the women, I do get kind of a bang out of watching, because they do have to pull out a 5-iron occasionally, and come in with a decent shot from 180 yards. These guys are hitting their 9-irons 180 yards. I'm like, what? Well, I don't get that.
Well, and also too, I think what it is, John, is going back to what I was commenting earlier about shot makers. A lot of these guys years ago, like Trevino and Chichi Rodriguez and some of the other ones, and even Nicklaus and that to a point. Now, Nicklaus wasn't quite as much. He was sort of famous for his fade, but he had that high fade, and the ball landed softly and whatnot. And of course, he was a pretty big hitter for his day. But guys like Trevino and Rodriguez and some of the other ones out there, I mean, I can remember Chichi playing years ago when he was still playing on the regular tour, and he'd be out in the fairway and he'd hit a sweeping hook, and that thing would literally barely get off the ground, and he'd hook that ball and it would land on the green, and he might be 10, 15, might be 20 yards past the pin, and you think, how the heck did he stop that ball? But they just had so much creativity, and it was interesting because you'd sit there and you'd think, at first, especially if you saw it live. Now, TV didn't do it justice because he would hit the shot, and then, of course, the camera would cut in and so forth.
Right.
But if you saw what some of these guys did in a live tournament, you'd think, Lord, this guy's going to be way off somewhere. And, Trevino specifically, he'd get a 7-iron, he'd be in the middle of the fairway, and he'd hit this low, boring, driving ball in, and you'd think there's no way this thing's through the green. And that thing would hit once, twice, check, and it'd be rolling up towards the pin. You think, how the heck did he do that?
Right.
But they just had the mental capacity to be able to do this, and they made it fun and interesting to watch. And I'm not trying to, knock the guys today, but there's some phenomenal golfers out there, but that's what I feel lacks in the sport today. I want to see a little bit more of that back in, and not just, the entourage, like you said. It's not like, what's his name? I'm trying to think of the singer, Jay-Z, pulling up in, and he's, got his entourage around, and that's what you feel like.
Exactly. Well, and I'll tell you, that's what makes people like Keegan Bradley kind of popular, Phil Mickelson, Bubba Watson. Bubba Watson, when he won at the Masters, what did he win with? He won with a cut 9 out of the woods. That was a hell of a shot. And he should have won with that shot. But you get someone like Keegan Bradley, who looks like he's going to wet his pants every time he hits a shot. I love watching that guy. His eyes are squinting, his hands are jumping all over the shaft. You're like, oh my God, he's going to have a heart attack.
Yeah.
But I love that. To me, that's just entertaining and fun to watch. But
exactly. John, let's let the listeners know once again where they can get a copy of Sweet Spot. Where can we pick up a copy for those that?
All right. If you go to Amazon, you put in the entire title, Sweet Spot: Confessions of a Golfaholic, and it should come right up.
Okay.
If not, you go to the book section at Amazon, then put in the entire title. It'll come right up for you. And you can read a bunch of reviews from other readers that sort of give you a feel for how people have been taking the book. Or you can go to and find out. You can get to the link to the book from my own website, which is sweetspotthebook.com.
Perfect.
And there you have it.
So when are you working on your next project? What's your next project going to be?
I'm actually working on it. I was working on it today. I do a lot of storytelling. I've told I go into storytelling events and I tell stories. And most of my stories are either about my childhood, growing up when I was back in Albany, New York, back in the 50s and 60s. I grew from a family of 8 kids. And it was a madhouse. It was a real madhouse. And one of the taglines that I had was that it was a lot more like Lord of the Flies than the Brady Bunch. And it was kind of like every man for himself. And if you go for that last donut, I will cut your hand off. It was like that.
Yeah.
And then I had my own 2 children, which was an entirely different parenting experience than what my parents had. And so I tell a lot of contrasting stories about growing up in them with my own kids. So I've been writing a book about those stories. And that's what that's it.
Kind of leading towards that.
Sure. Well, yeah, and it's
John,
actually kind of fun. I forgot about all of the funny little things I did with my kids when they were little. But I wrote most of it down, so, that helped. I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
Well, I'm sure that that's going to be an interesting book as well, and I would look forward to getting a copy of that. John, I just want to thank you for coming on Golf Talk Live this evening. I enjoyed the conversation. Obviously, being a golf program, we talk about a lot of different things here. I've had a number of teaching pros on here, and I had a few months back I had the legendary Billy Casper on here, which was a great golfer and was, I believe, number 6 or number 7 all time, and had shared some stories in that. But it's refreshing to have someone like yourself on here who, of course, is an avid golfer and loves the game and has played over the years, and sharing a great story like this. And I can't emphasize enough what a truly fabulous book this is. And I strongly urge all of the listeners out there tonight to make sure you get a copy. And I'm going to give that information again one more time once we're done. But I will also make sure, John, that I get it up on my website as well, so that link is there for those that are surfing my website and on my social media. But John, I want to thank you for being a guest of Golf Talk Live this evening. I certainly thoroughly enjoyed it, listening about the story, and I know we didn't give away too much of the meat of the book, but that's the price you pay when you write a book. You want people to buy it. You don't want to give it all out and
that's right.
a broadcast like this. But truly feel honored to read this book, John, and I wish much continued success. And I hope that you will come back in the future and share some more great stories with us.
I'd be happy to. Thank you so much for having me. You were just a wonderful, wonderful host. I can't thank you enough.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. John, you have a great, be safe up there. I know you're getting some snow and you're hunkering down, as you said to me earlier, so hopefully the winter blast will blow over. But John, thank you very much for being my guest on Golf Talk Live this evening.
All right, Ted. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, good night.
Good night.
All right, you've been listening to Golf Talk Live, and my special guest this evening was John O'Hearn, who wrote really, truly an incredible book, and I strongly recommend those of you tuning in live tonight that you get yourself your hands on a hot little copy of it. It's entitled Sweet Spot, Confessions of a Golfaholic, and it truly encapsulates what we talked about this evening, and I know that you probably were hoping for a little bit more substance tonight about the book, but I want you to get a copy. I think you'll enjoy it much more delving into it for the first time. So make sure you get a copy, and as John indicated, you can learn a little bit more about it if you want more information, or you want to read some of the great reviews that John has received on the book. You can visit his website at www.sweetspotthebook.com, or you can go directly to Amazon.com and purchase your copy. Just as he typed in you can either do Amazon.com/Sweet Spot Confessions of a Golfaholic, or you can just do it in a general Amazon.com search, or you can visit his website, sweetspotthebook.com, and the link is there as well. So make sure you get a copy. I strongly, 2 big thumbs up for this. You did a great job, John, and thank you again for being my guest this evening. Just before I close out the program here in just a minute or two, I just want to remind everybody that coming very soon, in fact, just in a few short weeks, we're going to be starting, as we've talked about here many times on the program, we're going to be starting the new segment, Coach's Corner, here on Golf Talk Live, and that's going to be an opportunity for you, the listeners, to be able to call in into Coach's Corner. It's going to be the first hour of the regular Thursday night broadcast from 6 p.m. Central Standard Time to 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, as the Coach's Corner segment is going to start off the broadcast each week on Golf Talk Live. And it's going to give you an opportunity to call in or email your questions to the program and pick the brains of some of the best coaches, teaching pros, and golf gurus each week here on Golf Talk Live. And I'm going to have a different panel each week, and we'll cover a new topic each week, plus help some of you weekend warriors improve your golf game. So make sure you tune into the live broadcast or email your questions to, don't forget the email, questions.golftalklive@gmail.com. That's questions.golftalklive@gmail.com. Make sure you send those in ahead of time, and we'll be sure to read them out live to the panel on the air. That's beginning March the 6th. Here on Golf Talk Live's Coach's Corner, new segment that's starting on March the 6th. beginning at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And, of course, after that hour has been completed with the panel, then I'm going to have one of my regular interviews and maybe some other surprises along the way. So beginning again March 6th here on Golf Talk Live, the new Coach's Corner segment is going to be taking place, and they got some great coaches. In fact, my guest last week, PGA teacher professional Tom Patry, is going to be one of the first guests coming on with two other gentlemen. And I don't have the names right here in front of me. I apologize. But he's going to be coming back on. I wanted to mention that since he was my guest last week. He'll be here on March the 6th at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time on Golf Talk Live. Also coming up in April of this year, as I mentioned to you, a little something for you ladies that are tuning into the program. This is going to be your own show. Beginning in April, I will be joined from time to time by none other than LPGA professional Cindy Miller. She'll be doing some co-hosting, and I've got a few others lined up as well. They're going to be coming on the program, and we're going to be interviewing. The program will tackle many of the important topics facing women in the golf industry today, from everything from equipment to some coaching tips, health, and some travel tips as well for those of you that want to plan a great golf vacation. We've got some great people lined up to come on the program, and we're going to be talking with really everybody from some of the best players on the LPGA Tour as well as women in the corporate world, plus some great teaching instructors from the LPGA as well. And so make sure, now I know that I mentioned this the last couple times I was going to have an exact date. I believe the date is going to be held on Tuesdays at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. And it'll be run an hour-long program, so it'll be going from either 8 Central Standard Time, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., or 9 a.m. Eastern to 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It'll be a 1-hour slot to begin with. And we'll have everything, as I said, from some LPGA Tour players who will be stopping by from time to time and giving us an update on what's happening with their game and just share some insight, as well as some great women teacher professionals out there from all over the country and from around the world will be joining us here as well, here on the Golf Talk Live. And that new segment is going to be called the Women of Golf. And I wanted to create that special program for just you ladies out there, just because I know that you're wanting some more information on how to improve your games. And also we're going to talk about how some of you ladies out there that have a passion for golf and maybe are unsure of how to pursue that, whether it comes from a playing standpoint or maybe a teaching standpoint. We're going to get some experts on the show here to talk about how you can become a member of the LPGA Tour as a player and or as a teaching professional. So we're going to give you some of that insight. Cindy and I will share that with you in upcoming programs. It's either, as I said, going to be starting on the 8th, which is the first, actually the second Tuesday. We're not going to start it on the first Tuesday, but either the second or the third Tuesday of April, we'll be starting the new Women of Golf segment here on Golf Talk Live. And that'll begin at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time and running through till 10 a.m. So I'll give you more updates as the shows progress here. I want to take this opportunity to thank all of my listeners worldwide for faithfully tuning in to Golf Talk Live each week. I have a great amount of pleasure and enjoyment for having a number of highly talented coaches and teaching professionals, authors, as I did tonight, and other entrepreneurs in the golf business stop by here on Golf Talk Live. And it's through their participation and guest appearances that have helped to make Golf Talk Live a first-class show. So thank you, everybody, for that. I want to send a special thank you to some great people out there, Mr. Jonathan Laird of South Coast Golf Guide for continuing support as one of the sponsors of this program. You can get in touch with Jonathan if you're interested in getting your hot little hands on one of his publications. Great guide here in the southeastern part of the United States. You can reach him at jonathan@southcoastgolfguide.com. If you're interested in advertising in that guide as well, you can reach Jonathan that way. Meredith Kirk of Meredith Kirk Golf and also magazine Endless Golf, a Myrtle Beach magazine. And she was, as I've mentioned many times on recent shows, she was recently crowned here just a few short months ago the 2014 Mrs. South Carolina, and congratulations again, Meredith, on that crown. And I believe she's going to be going in later this year. From some of the blogs and that I've read, that she's going to be entering in and taking her next level to the Mrs. America contest, which I believe is in August of this year. So we'll try and get her back and get some updates on that. But congratulations again on your recent crowning as 2014 Mrs. South Carolina, and best of luck in the Mrs. America pageant as well. Also, some shout out to some great supporters of the program, Nikki and Tiffany Litherland, for always continuing to help spread the word here on Golf Talk Live. Some great friends that I've met through Facebook and some of the other social media sites that I'm involved with. Thank you for doing that. And, of course, I can't forget to give a special thank you to another sponsor and promoter of the program, Mr. Bernie Pinder. He is the founder and president of Ontic Golf, a great line of custom putting putters and so forth. And Mr. Bernie Pinder has been on a guest on the show, of course, and he's continued to support this program. And I will, of course, continue to support Ontic Golf. And last but not least, my good friend from over in Ireland, Peter Doyle of Doyle Golf Solutions. He is a great instructor as well as a great master club fitter and club maker. So for those of you that are over across the big pond, make sure that you look up Peter Doyle at Doyle Golf Solutions. Thank you, Peter, for your continued support. Thanks again to my special guest tonight, John O'Hearn, author of Sweet Spot, Confessions of a Golfaholic, available at Amazon.com. Thanks for stopping by Golf Talk Live. Have a great weekend, everybody. I will see you back here next Thursday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time here on Golf Talk Live. God bless and have a great evening, everybody.